Greetings, everybody. Welcome to TV Skywriter. Pat Murray, your host here. TV Skywriter is a show that emanates from Durham, North Carolina. Basically, I like to talk to creative people, artists, musicians, authors. If you want to be a guest on the show, doesn't matter where you are. This is the internet, after all. So all you have to do is just send me an email, durhamskywriter@gmail.com. Now, today we've got two fabulous visual artists. Now, both of you live in Durham, right?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Really cool guys. We have Jamal Walton. He's a web designer and, I should say you're an artist and a web designer. And Malcolm Goff, an artist and a school teacher who teaches here at EK Poe locally here in Durham, North Carolina. Welcome to the show, gentlemen.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Yeah, I just basically wanted to talk about the visual arts, and let me get started by asking if you could give us a short history of your artistic careers. I'm sure you started as children in the arts, right? Let's start with Jamal.
Oh wow. Yeah, I mean, I remember drawing from the time I was really little. Like that. I mean, the very first things I remember doing is just drawing. I think I won my first drawing competition in like kindergarten, and I've been drawing ever since. Right now, I'm working on an online comic strip called Ungoodwise, and I've been doing comics for about the last 10 years on and off, as well as the web design stuff.
So when you were a kid, were you doing comics, or were you ever trying to draw, what's that, the realistic style, or always the comic style?
For me, I've never had one style. I've done photorealistic stuff. I've done lots of comic stuff. Recently, I've been doing a lot of comic book stuff. I've been trying to get back into doing the photorealistic stuff, but my heart has always been at the comics because, I mean, they caught me really early. I think I started reading comics when I was like 7 or 8 years old.
Did your parents approve? Because when I was, I started out drawing too. My actual earliest memory, I was probably like 3 years old. I actually had my own comic strip when I was about 3. I didn't stay with it like you guys did, but my parents thought that reading comics in high school and college was a bit beneath me, but I told them that Marvel Comics, as opposed to DC, was actually good for vocabulary and scientific theories and that sort of thing. So what did your parents think about you reading comics?
I don't think my parents ever really knew that I was reading comics. I don't ever remember having a discussion with them about the comic. I mean, I was always just reading whatever came upon me. So, you know, whether it was comics or books or whatever there was. I mean, I remember reading like instruction manuals to stuff, just because.
Instruction manuals?
Yeah, I would read instruction manuals sometimes.
Wow.
So,
now, Malcolm, let's talk with you for a sec. I want to know, when did you get started with the arts?
Like Jamal, I started very early. It was probably my earliest memories or drawing, and I was always very into art in school, and my mom was actually studying to become an art teacher when she got pregnant with my older sister.
Mm-hmm.
And back in those days, it was, I think, a little harder to go to finish college and have a baby. So she did not become an art teacher of the masses. She just became my art teacher.
Okay.
Which was very good.
I was surprised to find out that my dad, a lot of us, I want to talk about this a little more, where you start out artistic as a kid, and then you just kind of grow away from it. Like, I was surprised when I found out that my dad really loved to draw when he was younger. I found some sketchbooks and some cartoons that he had drawn. And I guess, just things don't all, I guess, I don't know. I guess that's what I want to ask you guys. I mean, what happens when you're a kid and you love art and you just sort of leave it behind or outgrow it, as some people say? I mean, what really happens with that?
Well, go ahead, Malcolm.
Okay. I've taught Jamal's kids, as well as he's taught them, of course. But I think that everybody needs creative outlets. So if you're not going to have it through the visual arts, you're going to find it somewhere else, or else you're going to end up kind of grumpy and maybe end up taking, I don't know, some kind of medicine that the doctor prescribes for you, you know, because you have to have that outlet.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I do play guitar, so I guess that's my outlet.
There you go. Yeah, yeah. So you found it somewhere.
Yeah, I found it somewhere else. Yeah. Although I still draw cartoons every now and then.
Yeah, and I was going to basically say what Malcolm said is that, I mean, we all, for me, my art has always been more therapeutic than financial. So for a long time, I just, you know, I grew out of it, so to speak. And it was really about just life getting in the way and just being really busy all the time and just not making time for it. And what I found is that during those times where I was too busy to make time for the art, you know, were the times where, you know, things weren't going the way I wanted them to go. So, you know, I just recently got back into doing a lot more art than I have in years, and I've gotten really prolific.
Wow. Now, I know the two of you this summer are going to run something called the Comic Creators Camp, and I'm wondering how the two of you meet, and did you both meet as comic book artists?
We met through E.K. Poe Elementary, which is here in Durham, and Jamal's kids have been going to E.K. Poe for what, the last 10 years?
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah, they were held back a few times, and it's okay. Just kidding. It was just, you know, several different ages of kids, and they all overlap at the school. And you know, he and I had been talking a while about you know, just getting together, and I would have questions about comic book stuff, and I would go to Jamal and I'd say, well, how do you do this? And he would answer. And then last summer we got together with a few other friends, and we went through this book called Drawing Words and Writing Pictures, and it was pretty neat. I mean, most of the stuff, you know, Jamal already knew because he's like our resident expert, but for the rest of us, it helped us get kind of close to his level, or at least his level was in sight of where we are. So, you know, it was good. So that, you know, kind of gave us this foundation. I would say I've been dabbling in the art of comic books for my whole life, but I never had anybody push me and say, hey, finish a comic book. You know, I'm a fine artist by training, and I wanted to develop that skill, and, you know, to develop a skill, you have to study it. So, you know, I got Jamal and a few other people, and we were able to get it going. And I think for me also, with getting the comic camp together, it was like, if kids can get that, like I wanted to push my kids in that way, my own personal kids, you know, and then my students, and then other people's kids too, you know, so that they don't have the same hang up with it that I had, and I had to, you know, as an adult, train myself.
What do you mean hang up? You mean as far as comics not getting the respect they deserve, or what?
No, hang up as in not knowing how to execute it.
Oh, okay, okay.
Yeah, like, you know, if you were to, okay, if you play a musical instrument, if you transition to a different musical instrument, you're going to have this learning curve that you have to deal with. And,
sure,
you know, for me, I had the same issue with comics. You know, I've been reading them forever, but I didn't know how to fully finish one. I guess, I don't know, is that the right way to say it?
Yeah, yeah.
You understand what I mean?
Yeah, Okay. Well, let me ask the both of you. Now, Again, like I was telling you, grew up with Marvel comics. Back then it was just Marvel, DC, of course the Archie comics, and what was those cheap ones, Gold Star or something with the star.
Oh, yeah,
yeah. And the new modern type comics that are out now that are really artsy, real art, didn't come out until I was an adult, as far as I know. And I know that anime, I didn't really see that until maybe college.
Anime.
And so I'm just wondering, what is it now that the kids are reading when it comes to comics? Is it all anime, or I mean, I know that there's movies, Spider-Man and Iron Man movies, so I know Marvel comics still exist. But for the most part, are kids still reading Marvel, or have they all switched to anime?
Well, I think recently we've seen kind of like a renaissance in comics where Marvel and DC aren't the only games in town. I mean, even Scholastic has its own comic book imprint where they have Bone and Missile Mouse and the Amulet series. So
I don't know about any of that.
Yeah, and even you have things like Diary of the Wimpy Kid.
Oh yeah,
right.
Yeah.
Which, that's more of a illustrated novel, but it still kind of falls in that same genre.
Now I know they made a movie from that. I haven't seen the book. So the book reads like a comic book?
It varies based upon the different books. I mean, some are more comic booky, some are more like journal types. But I mean, there's a wide variety of comic-like books out there now, and I think a large part of that is that comics help kids learn how to read because
I agree.
Because when we all start with really simple picture books, and being able to match the picture with the words that we're seeing, and what comic books do is that they intertwine the two together, and and what I found is it makes reluctant readers more likely to read books. So I'm constantly giving out comics to kids. I mean, and I keep comics. I mean, I have a shelf of comics where I just hand them out to people, and sometimes they come back, sometimes they don't. And when they don't, I just replace them.
Yeah.
But
I used to have a huge comic book collection. When I moved here to Durham, just gave them away.
Mine.
I missed them a little bit.
Mine was massive. I think at one point in time, I had over 100,000 comics. It was massive.
I was just talking about a couple of milk crates full.
Oh no, I had.
Maybe I shouldn't say collection. Whoa.
Yeah, I grew up with my dad has probably 50,000 comics. I don't know.
Your dad?
Yeah.
That's awesome.
But he always encouraged me with reading comics.
Wow. My dad, well, he didn't know any better. He thought the comics were, I don't know what he thought they were. He thought they were for little tiny children. And he didn't realize, not knowing about Marvel comics, because I was reading, what was that, who was the black superhero with a really big vocabulary? He was from Africa, the Black Panther?
Oh, the Black Panther, yeah. Black Panther.
Yeah.
And then the bilingual one who lived in New York, White Tiger. You might not know that one.
There was White Tiger. Yeah, White Tiger.
Not the same white. There's apparently two different White Tigers. I read that the White Tiger I'm talking about was Puerto Rican. He lived in New York, and it was about like a bilingual kind of thing. But then he was killed, and then his persona was taken over by a relative or something.
Yeah, I think the current White Tiger is female.
A girl. Yeah. So that's pretty wild. Now, again, I remember anime coming along when I was in college, and there was one series that fascinated me. And tell me if you've ever heard of anything like this. Okay, I don't know the name. It was all in Japanese. I had a Japanese schoolmate who her parents would send her these. I think she called them manga. Is that the right word?
Manga.
Yeah. Manga. Yeah. and she would share them with me, and I was fascinated. There was this one series, don't remember the name. It was a boxer, and what was really fascinating was it was one character with three storylines. So there was a story of this young boxer from young childhood. He was like a little kid, and then there was another series of him as a teenager, and another one, the same guy, as an adult. Three totally separate books.
I mean,
I guess it's like having Superman and Superboy at the same time, kind of like that.
Well, I mean,
it's fascinating.
The greatest thing about Japanese comic is that they're not necessarily all corporate owned, so they allow their stories to come to natural ends. So like we have Spider-Man. Spider-Man's never, the current Peter Parker Spider-Man will never disappear. No matter what they do, he will always come back to the status quo.
Okay.
He will always, Spider-Man will always come back to Peter Parker. Superman's always going to be Clark Kent. Batman's always going to be Bruce Wayne. There may be stories where it changes, but ultimately they're always going to fall back to that because that's what the masses know, and that's what is in the interest of these corporations. Whereas in Japan, it's more creator-driven. And so the creators can go and tell stories that have logical ends, and they can, tell a lifetime. I think in modern comics, modern American comics, the only real story that you have that actually, if you follow the life of a character, is probably Dave Sim's Cerebus, where you follow him from being a It was an independent black and white comic. It started in like late 70s, and it went for basically I think 300 issues. Okay. But basically a one-man team doing the book by himself.
Wow.
Funding it by himself, and he got into the industry at the right time and was able to make a living doing it. Cool. For 25 plus years.
So the character continued to grow, you mean?
Yeah, I mean, it follows him from like young adulthood. I mean, it's an aardvark character. So, and he started out as a barbarian, and you follow him through life. He becomes the Pope. He becomes Prime Minister.
What?
And
okay.
And then you follow it all the way to his death. So the very last issue is him dying.
Wow. Now, it seems to me, again, I haven't read comics for years now, but it seems to me that Peter Parker has gotten older. Because when I was a kid reading Spider-Man, it seems to me he was in high school or just out of high school. Mm-hmm. Isn't he older now?
Well, yeah, in the late 60s, in the 60s up till the mid-70s, he transitioned from high school into college, and then he finished college, and he actually got married. But what all that does is it ages the character, so he no longer becomes the everyday man that you need him to be. And so recently they've undone his marriage and reverted him back to basically what he was right outside of college. So
because I was wondering why they kept remaking the Spider-Man movies.
Well, they remake the movies because apparently every 10 years we forget and have to start over.
Well, just watch the old movie. Come on. Just watch the old one. I mean, it's like, you're not going to keep remaking Wuthering Heights, or actually I think they have.
Yeah,
but when I want to watch an old romantic movie, I watch the Wuthering Heights from the 1930s. It's wonderful. I don't need to have it updated.
Well, but look, I guess the only franchise they didn't reboot was Superman. So you had the first 4 Superman, and then they had Superman Returns, and that didn't do so well.
Yeah, it's all about money, and but I mean, comics and the movie industry are two separate things. But a lot of times, comic books and novels will inform, and people will make movies based off of them, but only if they're bestsellers. You know.
Oh, okay. So you're not going to see an Omega Man. You don't even remember Omega Man. I know you don't.
But I would disagree with you about the comic book having to be a bestseller, because nobody remembers the Men in Black comic book. And Men in Black was actually started as a comic book.
It was? Really?
Yep.
Well, I sure didn't know that.
Wasn't Men in Black produced as a comic book so that it could become a movie, though?
No. It's the same company, but it was before they became Platinum.
Okay, well, that's a technicality. I mean, they still probably had that big smile in mind, but, you know.
But yeah, it was a very small independent book. Like, almost nobody's heard of it. But Men in Black was a comic book.
Yeah, that's true. Sometimes they'll find stories that they feel are very adaptable for the screen, and then they'll adapt them. But, you know, a lot of times it's based on money.
Is there such a thing yet as an African American comic? I know that there was a Black Panther, we mentioned him, but that was a Marvel comic, and of course the White Panther was, I don't know if that was Marvel. I don't know what that was.
That was Marvel. Okay,
so is there such a thing as an independent African American comic company or comic strip?
There have been. There are clearly African American creators out there creating comics, and a lot of us are doing it independently. But
I meant like a full book, because I've seen, of course, I said black comic strips. Of course, we've seen black comic strips in the newspaper, but I meant like books, like comic books.
Oh yeah, most definitely. But I think the biggest minority comic company was Milestone. And they produced Hardware, Malcolm. What were the other books?
Static, and Static became a Saturday morning cartoon.
Yeah.
And I think it's still
I missed that.
Yeah, what happened was eventually they struck up a deal with DC somehow, and they got absorbed by DC. So now, It's a good and bad. I mean, you get more minority characters out there, and because Static, without DC behind it, Static would have never had a comic book or a cartoon, and more people know Static from his cartoon than they do from his comic book. But he started as. But there are lots of small, independent comics. There's even basically a black comic book convention now.
Whoa, nice.
But when you have, I think it's more needing more African American creators, because as a percentage of the overall number of comic book creators, blacks and minorities in general represent such a small portion of that. I think we're underrepresented, even when it comes to just, underrepresented below our normal, percentage of the population. And it's simply, a lot of comics is simply about networking and knowing people. So, especially when you're talking about working with the bigger companies.
Yeah. Well, here's the thing. My brother-in-law, Donald Douglas, he printed out an article and showed it to me, where it showed, I think this article was maybe from 15, 20 years ago, but basically, at that time, at least, all black movies made a profit. In other words, any black director who was able to put out a movie always made a profit, because it was just automatic that all the black folks were going to run out and see it, in addition to others who wanted to see the movie. So, you know what I mean? So if they were lucky or fortunate or well-connected enough to get a movie out, they were automatically going to get their money back and more. So it seems to me that would be the same idea with the comics. Wouldn't you think? We love visuals. We love words. we love colors, we love movement. Seems to me it's a no-brainer, so to speak. That anybody coming off the black comic would automatically make money, right?
I will I will say from experience that is not the case.
I think, okay.
Well, I think there are certain things that you can do in movies that don't necessarily translate well to comics, and I think there are certain genres that aren't represented in comics that. And I think the genres that are overrepresented in comics aren't those that will necessarily draw large black populations towards the stories. What
you mean? Break it down. What you mean?
Well, I mean, the comic book industry is largely dominated by, superheroes, and below that probably fantasy. So, and those two genres aren't necessarily genres that black people necessarily flock to, or minorities flock to it in general, mainly because those genres are stereotypically, whitewashed. You don't necessarily see very many black protagonists in those stories, and when you see any people of color in those stories, most of the time they're villains.
Oh, okay. So what do you think would work?
I think once you get away from stories, superheroes, and you start, reaching out into other genres like sci-fi or, utopian or dystopian futures, and, the wide variety of genres that exist outside of superheroes and fantasy, I think then you have a chance of making connections with the minorities.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, what do you think on that, Malcolm? You look very thoughtful.
I think that what we're trying to do with getting these young writers in the position of being able to tell their own stories, I think that's going to start to change that. And I think that, America is changing and the world is changing. And so, you can't help but have a more diverse representation of who you see in comic books, in movies, TV shows. It's all changing.
Well, I think that's real important because now I was born in '55, so I entered elementary school in 1960 or whatever. It was Dick, Jane, and Sally. Everything was white. I had no problem with that. I mean, that's just the way it was. However, I had a little brother who was 5 years younger, and he came home with books the likes of which I had never seen before. His books had black people and Hispanic people and Asians, and I was flabbergasted. I mean, I was blown away. I would steal my little brother's books and read them because I just couldn't believe that just seeing minority characters was just so exciting to me. It just seems to me maybe
it was in the 60s.
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, when you're my age, I mean, like I said, we all started out with, I don't even know if you know Dick, Jane, and Sally.
Yeah, I remember those books.
C-Spot Run or C-Puff or whatever, And again, all the characters were white, and like I said, I didn't have a problem with it until I saw that there were books with minority kids in them, and I was just thrilled beyond belief. Seems to me that any kid nowadays would be thrilled to see minorities in comic books and would automatically pick them up and at least see what they're about. I'm just saying.
Yesterday was Free Comic Book Day, so everybody put it on your calendar for next year because it's once a year. But I saw that Stan Lee, who is the one of the creators of Marvel Comics, has just started a new comic called Chakra with mostly East Indian characters, and I thought that was really cool. And I think that when we're talking about diversity, we're talking about all of it, and we want to see more Black writers. We want to see more Asian writers, Latino, Latina, Native American. We want to see more women writers. We want to see more white male writers who are very open-minded. You know, we want to see people who are coming from all different kinds of points of view. And I think that you can't help but have that. That's just the wave of the future, you know. And but I think the most important thing is that we've got to have good writing. It's got to have good writing. It's got to have good art, and you know, quality makes the grade. You know, and that, you know, makes the money. But you know, more importantly than making any money, it's that it will last.
Right, right. I'm wondering if you'd like to show off some of your art. Both of you are visual artists. Do you have anything that we can take a little peek at? Because I see something behind you. Because Jamal, I see something behind you.
My computer that I'm on.
Well, behind me are some paintings that I've been working on recently. I very recently started working with acrylics, and because I am a comic guy, the acrylics that I have are basically comic-based abstract paintings, I guess you would say.
Okay. I can, if you lean to your left, we can see. Yeah. Oh, I like that.
So I actually have. Let's see if I can pull them up. I actually have scans that I can show you of those, or a couple of the ones behind me. So let's see. I'll share my screen here.
Let's see. Ooh.
Yeah, so that one is what I call Last Sun, and it's my Superman inspired painting, clearly. And it's basically me, you know, taking something that's very common and abstracting it to the point where it becomes just simple geometry. And so I think I have a series of about 29 paintings that I did similar to this in theme. So this is my Superman one, and let's see, hold on. There. This is one based upon a very rare or obscure, for most people, Marvel character called Black Bolt. But the other one that you see behind me here, I guess over here, is based on Marvel's Thing. So
from
the Fantastic Four. Yeah.
It's clobbering time.
Yeah.
And folks, that was Jamal Walton's art. Is there somewhere people can go online to look at more of your art?
Oh, most definitely. You can. I like to keep things very simple. So I'm Jamal Walton, so you can find my stuff at ljamal.com. That's
very simple.
Yeah.
Oh, looks like Malcolm's showing something. Talk about what you're showing us there, Malcolm. Malcolm Goff.
Okay, this is a piece of my fine art, which actually was, it's got photography that I did in it, of a kid whose face I painted actually with a half skull, and then I manipulated the photograph in Photoshop, and I did a silk screen, and I printed it onto fabric, and then quilted around it. So it's got several different techniques that are involved in it, but I guess overall you'd say it's a quilt.
Beautiful.
Thank you. And let me see here.
And where can people see more of your art, Malcolm Goff?
At, let's see, Malcolm, just Google me. Malcolm Goff DJ is my artist name, Malcolm Goff, the visual DJ. And I've got a carbon-made website for now, and I hope to have even more of a web presence. I don't know, can you see this very well? This was a robot that I drew, and then I inked it. And it was actually based off of a model Japanese Gundam robot that my son and I made. And so I posed it and used that as my model.
Now, I don't know who or what Gundam is, but that kind of looks like Voltron. Is that the same character?
Well, Voltron is a form of a Gundam, which is a Gundam is basically like a giant robot with a human pilot, as opposed to a Transformer, which is a character. So, you know, I think that Gundams probably came first. I've been trying to get a book on history of Japanese robots, which I can't find. So if anybody out there knows of any, please let me know.
Well, I can tell you one thing. When I was a real little kid, the first Japanese cartoon out was Astro Boy. I can tell you that.
Mm-hmm.
After that, I do remember Speed Racer. And I remember being fascinated when I realized that the G means 5 for Mach 5. The G means 5.
I used to watch Speed Racer before kindergarten.
Go is 5. And but I also remember the first, I guess you could say, Gundam, is that the word? Robot that I remember was Gigantor, because that was my little brother's favorite cartoon show at the time. So that's the first. So I would say Astro Boy was probably. Oh, wait a minute. There was Eighth Man. Oh, wait a minute. Ooh. I think Astro Boy came out first because I was real little when that came out. But I think Eighth Man might have been around the same time. I don't know if you remember Eighth Man. But
I remember Speed Racer, though.
It has to be Gigantor.
The original.
Huh?
I said I remember the original Speed Racer. I would watch that before I went to kindergarten. I think I was in a half-day kindergarten, and would go and watch that. And
that was good stuff.
Cool. Yeah.
That was real good stuff. Now, I know you have this camp. I want you to tell us about the camp, but before you do, I want to ask you, how can we as adults encourage kids to continue with their art? Because I did express a little frustration earlier in the show that you kind of get away from it and you look back and realize, wow, I haven't done a cartoon in a decade or so, you know? And that's kind of frustrating when you look back. How can we, I know that we're worried about our kids. We want them to get ahead in the world. To hold on. I know these are tough economic times. And we want them to learn about computers and things that will get them jobs and be able to encourage them to start their own businesses and whatnot. But how can we as adults encourage kids to keep the creativity going? And to, if they like drawing, how can we let them know that it's okay to continue drawing, even if you grow up and get some fancy job or whatever?
You want to go first, Jamal? Because you know I got like an hour's worth of stuff.
Well, first, just don't discourage it. I think that's the biggest thing. I think a lot of adults discourage kids from actually drawing. Or, I mean, because I remember being in school and, you know, I was always an excellent student in school, but, you know, I would be bored. And because I was bored, I would draw. And most of my teachers were upset by that because they thought I wasn't paying attention. But what I found out later was that it helped me process information even better.
Really?
Yeah.
And how's that?
Well, I'm a very visual learner, and I just tended, and while I was drawing, I was, you know, I can like literally picture what is there on the page that I was drawing, and that image alone is enough to trigger all the information that was being said during that time.
Ooh, that sounds like a good talent to have.
So for me, especially once I got to college, I realized that, you know, I was doing much better in the classes where I was really not really paying attention in them and just drawing. And and that became the technique that I was using to actually, for studying. So if I look back at my notes during that time, it's a lot of drawing and just like very little actual note taking, but it's all there.
Is that something you can teach?
Not something I've been able to successfully teach my kids, but I know that they doodle a lot, and I don't ever discourage it. I make sure that we have plenty of paper, we have plenty of markers, we have plenty of crayons, pencils, whatever they need to draw with, they have it. And if they want to paint, they can paint. Whatever they want to do, no matter how messy, I don't ever discourage it. I just let them go at it.
Nice. Okay.
I noticed the same thing in college. If you go back and look at my notes too, that I started this technique of, especially because a lot of college professors do the lecture style teaching, which I don't know if they realize it, but that's really a outdated educational style as far as that being your primary teaching style. But college professors don't really care. They feel like they want to get the information out, and you better just pay attention. So I developed a technique of drawing portraits of them in the middle of my paper, and then putting my notes all around the outside of it. So like in these parts,
Oh, wow.
And also have sometimes like an illustration that would show their point. And like Jamal said, I noticed that it helped me to remember things a lot better. So I wish that I had learned that earlier, so maybe we need to develop something like that, Jamal. We could be millionaires. But
that amazes me. That really does.
Yeah. Let me go back to Jamal's other point, though, about not discouraging kids. I teach kindergarten through 5th grade students daily, and a lot of times older kids as well. And it's so sad to me because sometimes I'll have a kid who, say in kindergarten, I will see they're very talented. 1st grade, they're still very talented. And then there's this block that comes up sometimes where in class I'll say, okay, do this. And it's something that I already know that they can do because I've seen them do it before, and I want them to build on that. And then they come and they say something like, oh, I can't draw. And I say, I've known you since kindergarten. What are you talking about? You're very talented. And, they won't say it, but what I realize is that at home, someone has discouraged them. And it puts this block up in their mind, and it tells them that they can't. And you don't ever tell kids that they can't do something that they're interested in as long as it's not bad for their health, or bad for their psychological well-being or something like that. If your kid is into science, if your kid's into engineering, really into math, really into singing, really into performing, you need to keep encouraging them, even if you don't know that much about that art form or that lifestyle or that way of being. You gotta encourage them. Maybe even find out some more for yourself if you're a parent. It will really, really take the kid far. And the biggest thing to me about art is confidence. I'll see a kid who has confidence in their art, and that also translates into their just regular confidence in themselves and their life, right? And then I'll see a kid who has no confidence in themselves, and it definitely shows up in their art. So, there's definitely a correlation there that it needs to be developed more, and people really need to get that message loud and clear. Do not discourage your children.
Do you think that maybe some of these parents, although they might be a little misguided, are trying to look out for their kids? In other words, they're saying you can't get anywhere by drawing cartoons, and we want you to be a doctor. Do you think that's behind it? They're thinking of their future plans and not allowing their kids to...
Yeah, I think that's part of it. I just ran into a parent, actually, when I was out kind of hustling, trying to get more people out for the camp. And he was at the carnival for another local elementary school. And so I was there, my kids were there, and we were handing out flyers. And so I ran into this guy, and turns out his brother worked for, or still works for, Will Smith's company. And he was telling me about how the movie I Am Legend took 12 years for them to get out because they couldn't get the right people in the room who had the vision of where that movie needed to go as far as like storyboarding, which is, you know, basically comic book art, and just like the different pieces of the puzzle that you need to do to have to put a movie out. And it just took them an exorbitant amount of time. And that it's these types of thinking skills that we're using in this camp that are what we call 21st century skills, 21st century thinking skills, right? They're things that you find in the business world, in the corporate world, in any kind of thing, you know, place where you're producing something. Broadway plays, you know, it's all this type of thinking skill, you know, where you're working on storyboard, you're connecting a story with a picture, with the sequence of events. You're developing the music that goes with it, you know, and I'm sure that computer programmers and people who are developing video games, people who are developing websites, you know, marketing, franchising, all that stuff, it's this type of thinking skill, you know. So
I agree, because they say that nowadays the modern era jobs all involve, not all, many of the modern era jobs involve competent storytelling. If we're talking about journalism, I'm a journalist. Part of my job is telling the stories of other people so that other people can know about them, be aware of them. It's the same with public relations. You're trying to tell enough of a story so that people want to do business with your clients. It's the same with statisticians even. Basically, through statistics, you're telling the story of this year's, how the baseball player, whatever, is doing this year. You can tell if the statistics are given in a creative way. You can tell exactly what kind of year a certain athlete's doing. So even with math, I mean, you're telling stories. And
check this out. Hold on. I just heard a story recently about doctors who are starting to need the skill of storytelling because it helps them in understanding their patients better and their patients' need. You know, because they need to ask the patient, what is going on? What's your story? What's happening in your life? And it's helping them to understand what's going on, causing illnesses and causing different things that happen in the patient's life. Then the doctor can understand this better.
I am so thankful you said that, because too often I hear people complain that when they go to the doctor's office, the nurse spends more time with them and the doctor breezes in and looks at your symptoms and then writes a prescription. And there's not much conversation going on. So if they're finally learning the art of storytelling and how it can help them figure out what's going on with their patient, I'm so happy to hear that.
That's what I heard.
That is great. Well, tell us about the camp that you're going to start. I think it starts, what, next month? Right, in June? Or
yes.
Yeah, tell us about the camp. What's it called? Comic Creators Camp, right?
That's correct.
Yeah, tell us about it.
It's going to be held at our school, which is E.K. Poe Elementary School, and we hope to have 40 kids per session, and we have 4 teachers, me, Jamal, and Doug Coleman, who is current 4th grade teacher at Lakewood Elementary here in Durham, and Morgan McPhail, who is 4th grade teacher at E.K. Poe Elementary with me, and she was my daughter Asada's classroom teacher. She also is a Hollywood screenwriter, and she got sick of that, and she wanted to deal with the real world, and she wanted to become a teacher. So, you know, I mean, that's a good way to spend your time, you know. screw Hollywood. Let's
Wow, I like that. Okay.
That's excellent. So, but she has a wealth of knowledge around teaching writing, and I think that her experience as being a professional writer is really good for kids, because then they can see, okay, I can take this skill and I can do whatever I want with it. I can go work in Hollywood, or I could work in Hollywood and then become a teacher.
Yeah.
Or whatever else you want to do with it.
And nowadays you don't have to go to Hollywood to get stories done. Now with the internet, cheap cameras, or I should say low-cost cameras, and YouTube, you can put out your own movie.
Exactly. Yep. And that's one of the things that we're going to do, and this is where Jamal's expertise comes in as a comic artist who's got artwork on the web and is blogging his stories. That's what we're going to do with the kids. Is they're going to develop these stories, they're going to draw them, they're going to ink them, and we're going to put them on the internet as in the form of a blog. So they're all become bloggers, web blogging comic artists and writers.
So if we want to follow that, do we go to Comic Creators Camp? Do we Google that, or what?
We haven't actually figured out where we're going to put the kids' work yet, but you'll always be able to go to comicsportfolio.com and follow the camp.
Comicsportfolio.com, writing it down. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, cool.
And
we'll definitely check it out.
And and this is the other thing about having people with these different talents. Jamal has been in the world of the computer website development since there was computer website development on the internet. He's been with it the entire time. As a professional artist working. So I mean, tell that to people who discourage their kids from being in the arts. There's plenty of jobs in the arts.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so more about the camp. It's very affordable. Am I allowed to say actual prices?
Sure.
Okay, so it's $150 a week. And if you compare that to other camps that are going to be of this high quality that this one is, that's very affordable. We actually had a conversation about, if we were going to charge $300 a week or not, and we came to the conclusion that we could charge $300 a week, but we just didn't want to, because we were all parents and working class folks, and we have a very high quality product here, but we also want it to be affordable, So, we priced it at $150 a week, and we're running it for 3 weeks, 3 different sessions. The first one starts June 17th and runs through the 21st. The second one, hold on, let me look at my calendar. It's that following week. It is June 24th to the 28th. And then we skip July, and we have a third session, August the 5th to August the 9th.
Okay. I want to ask you something. Okay, we're talking about visual art, comics, and blogging and all that. I'm kind of fascinated. You haven't mentioned anything about sound. Are any of the kids who happen to be talented in music, are they going to be able to put something together with, like, what's that free program with Max, GarageBand, or put, their own music to accompany the comic?
Yeah, for what we're doing, we're not going to necessarily get into sound, but next year, I think we'll probably run the camp again more of the way that we did it for the UPenn camp that we did in, I think it was 2009 or 2010. We ran it as 1 week of stop motion animation, 1 week of where the kids would develop their own movie where they were acting in it, and we used the iMovie program, and then we also had 1 week where we were doing comics. So I think that next year, my plan is to run the camp for more weeks during the summer, but also to offer more things. In fact, my brother-in-law is a Grammy-nominated musician, and he wants to come up and do some music-based camps.
Oh, that sounds great.
Yeah. So we can definitely expand it. And I want to do some murals and some printmaking with the kids, so that we have a more rounded arts experience as well. But comics comics bring it all together. And then if we can start animating the comics, wow, talk about bringing everything together.
I want to tell you guys something. Again, being older than you guys, when we were really, really little, let's see, I guess this would be mid-'60s. This is before Spider-Man, and before Fantastic Four, because they did have comic Saturday morning, shows that we used to watch. Silver Surfer, Fantastic Four, Spider-Man, when he had a jazz theme. But I wish I had I don't have a cartoon here with me, but I'll just use my cell phone. The first Marvel comic show that I remember was so bad, or so low cost, that instead of having real, animation with the characters moving, they would take a drawing, I'm holding from the camera here, and they'd hold the drawing and move it across the screen.
Mm-hmm.
That was the animation. And that was Marvel Comics.
Yeah.
It was wonderful because you could use your imagination. So the comic here, he'd have his superhero pose, and then like I said, they just move him across the screen. Unbelievable.
That's cool. Yeah, I mean, people talk about wanting to get more technology into the schools and into their kids' hands and everything, and I think that's great, but I think you also have to keep in mind what is technology, and a lot of times people don't like to hear me say this, but you can teach creatively with a stick and dirt. You can teach kids to be creative, and I don't mean that's the only thing, but I mean that's all you need. I mean, and if you don't have a stick and dirt, like you said, just use your imagination.
Yeah, look at these bucket drummers. I mean, they have a bucket. These kids have a 5-gallon bucket and 2 sticks, and they're making music.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
They're not using any high-tech technology, and they're just using their skills, their love for music, and the materials on hand.
That's how the steel drum was invented, and that's how a lot of things are invented. It's being creative and using the materials that you have. That's technology.
Do you think that maybe kids are too reliant on computers? I mean, I know a lot of kids don't have computers and internet at home, but do you think they're, when it comes to learning how to do things like draw and create music, do you think kids are not even considering doing things like that because they're on the computer too much? What do you think?
Well, I think it really depends on how they're using the computer. So I will say that I learned how to draw traditionally on pen and paper, but almost 100% of the drawing that I do now is all digital. And for me, it's simply because it's faster. So
when you say it's digital, what do you mean how can you draw digitally?
I have you can't see it, but I have an actual pen and a tablet in which I can just draw, and what I draw ends up on the screen. And so I'm able to draw. So you can Google me and you can see my Facebook page, and you'll see the various steps that I take in creating one of my strips. So, and it's all done on the computer. So I start just like I would start on paper. I would start with a sketch, but it's just this very light sketch that I'm drawing straight on the computer, and then I'll go back in and I'll tighten up that sketch, and then I'll go in and I digitally ink it. So I go in and I digitally create black lines with my tablet, and then I color.
I know you could do that.
Yeah. And so
Well, what are you showing us there, Malcolm? What's that?
This is similar to what Jamal's saying, although I was just playing around on this one when I first got this. This is something I drew on my iPad, just using the this program. Did you mention it, Jamal? This bamboo paper.
Oh,
And, you know, and this was a free program actually on the iPad. So just, you know, you can use this stuff.
So, I mean, like I said, it goes back to how you're using the technology. So I use the technology to speed up my normal process. So, because, you know, my normal process would be drawing it on a piece of paper, inking it on a piece of paper, and then because I color using the computer, I'd have to scan it all in and then color. And then, so by drawing everything on the computer, it speeds up the entire process and it cuts out the scanning completely. Because it's all there.
I didn't know you could do that. I didn't know that was possible. Wow.
And so, but, you know, but a lot of people, their kids use computers as, you know, another entertainment device. So they're playing games on the computer.
That's what I'm talking about. I mean, I'm wondering, do they spend too much time playing games and not being creative?
I think we spend a lot of time with passive entertainment where we're not actively involved with the entertainment. Whether I mean, personally with my kids, I prefer them playing video games to watching TV, because at least when they're playing video games, they're actually interacting and they're learning and putting together the hand-eye coordination. They're, you know, it's a skill that they're learning at least. And for my little kids, you know, because I have a 3-year-old and she is learning the skills it takes to manipulate things on the screen. So I try to weave in the technology in a way in which it's not passive for them. So they're not just, you know, being vegetables watching TV. So, but, you know, my job is, you know, deals very much with technology. So I don't want to discourage people from using technology. I want you guys to use as much technology as possible, so I can build more websites for you. But I use my computer probably, you know, 8, 10, 12 hours a day.
Wow.
Between programming and drawing. You know, I'm always there. And when I'm not, you know, I have a phone where I'm playing games. So I'm actively involved or engaged with technology almost from the time that I wake up until the time that I go to bed. And sometimes I just need to disconnect. And when when I'm doing paintings, I'm totally disconnected from everything else. You know, it's just me and the paint, or me and the kids in the paint. And I think everybody needs that disconnect. That we shouldn't be wired 24 hours a day. That we need to do things that don't involve technology. I mean, take your kids to the park. You know,
that kind of technology.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with you. What do you think, Malcolm? Because you're a dad too.
Yeah. Well, I don't put it in terms like this for the kids. Although now maybe I will, because they're old enough to get it. But you know, do you only want to be a consumer of things your whole life, or do you want to be a producer? Do you want to make?
Yes.
You know, and so I try to do that. I try to have a healthy balance. You know, it's definitely easier to be the consumer and to, you know, enjoy things. And think about it, like when you're reading a great book, you're still a consumer. You're just reading. You know, we don't frown on reading like we do, you know, watching TV for 16 hours a day. But, you know, nevertheless, it's still you're consuming, which is good. But, you know, let's also produce. Let's get, you know, more stories out. Tell your own story. Tell what happened to you. Tell, you know, make up something. You know, be creative.
Well, I read all the time as a kid, and now I'm a writer, so that kind of follows. I guess kids who do a lot of storytelling and drawing and whatnot, eventually, who knows, the sky's the limit, really. I shouldn't even say what kind of jobs they lead to, because again, I pointed out some jobs that people think of as mathematical type jobs that involve storytelling and creativity. So.
Well, I think that even when we're talking about the jobs of the future, you know, there's a lot of art out there that people don't even think about. Just think about all of the animated shows that exist. You know, there's somebody drawing something along the way. I mean, even your Pixar movies that are computer generated, they start off as storyboards. Start off as storyboards. you know, even television shows are storyboarded. So,
Yeah.
you know, there's a lot of art
I didn't
out
know that.
there. You know, and there are logos that have to be designed, there are websites that have to be designed, you know, magazines have to be laid out, even if magazines are disappearing. You know, there's a lot of art out there that we don't think about as art because we're consuming it every day. I mean, even if it's product packaging, you know, somebody is putting that art together.
Yeah.
And also, I don't know the correct terms, but you know, when you do your Facebook or your blog, whatever, there are these artistic backgrounds that you can choose from.
Mm-hmm.
What are they called? Backgrounds? What are they called?
They're backgrounds. They're backgrounds, and there's somebody out there producing them, and the themes and the different things.
Themes.
So, yeah,
That's the word. Themes, right?
Yeah, I mean, there are people out there that are producing all of this.
Mm-hmm.
There's also the whole realm of drafting, which is art also. You know, anything like from your TV to your game console to your phone, your knives in your kitchen, your forks, you know, all that stuff, they're drawing it out in there. If it's being mass-produced, they have to have mechanical drawings of it first.
I actually met a guy whose job...
Every single part on your car. You know,
I was just going to say that. I met a guy...
You don't even know are there. They had to be drawn.
Yeah, I met a guy who was an artist for one of the auto manufacturers, and his job was to design the interior of cars. I thought that was so cool.
Yeah, and you mean, and from an engineering standpoint, you have people designing buildings, designing bridges. I mean, all of that takes creativity. It takes art. I mean, I went to school and I studied engineering, and so I know, you know, your buildings, somebody's out there drawing, putting together the ideas, and then you have an engineer that's going through making sure that it's structurally sound so it doesn't fall down. Your bridges, I mean, everything around us, you know, there's some art involved in it, and we don't necessarily think of those as artistic jobs, but you know, there's a lot of art. So every time you're discouraging your child from doing art, you know, you're keeping them from getting that storyboarding job or getting that job as an architectural designer. I mean, you know, even like city planners, you know, there are people out there that are putting together plans for cities that are drawing, you know, where your parks are going and where your business districts are.
Yeah, and can I reflect one more thing too? I meant to put this in earlier, but I forgot, and Jamal just kind of reminded me, is that we put a lot of emphasis on the arts as something that you can make money at, right? And I think that that's a big question in people's lives, you know, especially as parents. You know, you want to encourage your kid to do something that is going to be lucrative for them in the future, right? But that's not our only purpose as human beings. You know, our purpose, you know, we want to be happy in our lives as well. So, I mean, if you end up having, you know, a kid grows up and has a job that maybe has nothing to do with the arts as far as they can tell, I think even that person still needs to have some kind of creative outlet in their lives. You know, you can do something professionally, but you can also do something as a hobby. And I heard another thing, you know, a story recently where they were talking about how as Americans, we have kind of dropped the ball in our realm of our life known as the hobby. You know, so if you're a hobby artist, that's fine. I actually know plenty of really, really talented people who just... They almost view it as sacrilegious to sell their artwork, you know, because they feel like it's something that it comes from God, and that if they put a price tag on it, it demeans it. And I think that's fine. I think that's great to have that kind of view of your art, and it puts it in this holy place, you know. That's fine, you know. Do that. Be happy. Be creative.
Well, I still cartoon every now and then, but one thing I do more often than that is I play my guitar a lot, and I'm starting to even put on guitar tutorials online, and that's my way of sharing my creativity and showing other people how to do the same. And I might not ever play in a band again. I used to play in a salsa band back home, and used to play jazz with different musicians, but I don't do that here in Durham. I seem to have moved on to a different existence or something. I don't know. But I'm getting back to it.
Maybe it'll place in your life again.
I guess. I mean, I didn't play my guitar for 2 years after I moved here. And I couldn't believe it was such an unhappy time. You know, you gotta, even though, like I said, I might not ever join a band again, but I realized I have to keep up the guitar playing because it makes me happy. And by sharing it online, I'm teaching other people how to, well, do what I do if they choose to want to learn the kind of chords that I play or whatever. And it's just my way of sharing the fun of music, the joy of it. I might not ever make a dime from it again. It doesn't matter. And it's the same with the cartooning. Like you said, it doesn't have to do with your job. It could be just something that you do when you get home, or something that was, with you two being dads, I can imagine the fun it must be to draw with children.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I find I wish I could draw and just be so free with it as my kids are, because, you know, anytime I put pencil or pen to paper, or, you know, like I said, I draw digitally, you know, I'm constantly fussing over, you know, is this line right? Is this line? And I mean, like, I'm really a hobbyist right now in terms of my comic book work, but, you know, I force myself. I have this deadline because I put up a new strip every Monday. So I had to create a deadline for myself in order to just produce work, because otherwise it would never get done. Like, I have stories that I started back in 2000 that I was not able to finish because it wasn't perfect and I had no deadline. And so I was constantly fussing over it. And
I learned a long time ago, it doesn't have to be perfect.
Yeah, but, you know, right. So I created myself this deadline, and I took this same story that, you know, was sitting for almost 13 years, and I was able to get it done in less than a month. And it's done, it's online, and people can see it, warts and all. But yeah, just like working with my kids, I'm just amazed at, you know, they just put things down and they just move on to the next thing, and they're just constantly putting things down. And
that's great. Well, what we're going to do, we're going to sign off. I want to thank the both of you for being on. Now, you have your, let's see, you have your website listed under your little face there, Jamal?
Yes, I do.
Ungood, what does it say?
Ungoodwise. It's my
ungoodwise.com.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, it's my online comic strip. It's about this. It's like what we were talking about earlier, introducing minorities into you know, comic books. So this is my dystopian future. You know, the lead characters are all African American, and there's actually a Native American that's part of the main character. So it's a story that I've had in gestation for like 13 years, and I'm finally getting it out.
I'm going to check it out as soon as we end the show. I'm going there and going to look at it. So, Malcolm Goff, again, how can people find your work?
You could look me up on some kind of search engine. You could Malcolm Goff, the visual DJ. I was trying to get a fancy thing in the bottom of my screen as well, but I was having some technical difficulties.
That's okay, because your last name is so easy, Goff, right?
That's correct.
Malcolm Goff, that's very easy.
And, you know, seeing Jamal's one-page-a-week concept has inspired me, and I'm working on a comic as well. So I'm hoping to get that up pretty soon.
Excellent.
Oh, and I gotta say, I made a deal with my daughter that if she wrote and penciled a story, that I would ink it for her. So we're working on that as well, and that's
cool. That's very cool. Okay, gentlemen, Jamal, Walton, Malcolm, Goff, thanks for being on the show. Really appreciate it. And
Thanks for having us.
So 2 things I want to point out to the viewing audience. Number 1, if you have kids, be creative with them. In fact, even if you don't have kids, I remember I interviewed a guy when I was still living in Chicago. This guy was an artist since he was a kid. He loved to draw and paint. He was super talented, but his family was very low income, and they didn't really want him to pursue art. He became a welder, and later on in life, the kids in the neighborhood, once they realized he was an artist, they would come to his house and ask his wife if he could come out and play. And he would actually sit on the front porch with the neighborhood kids and draw with them. And then he started going to the public library and teaching kids how to draw. He would make sculptures out of like mud. And he also made hand puppets for kids. And I'm just thinking that's what people should do if they're creative, even if their kids are grown or if they don't have any kids at all. Go ahead and teach kids anyway how to be creative. If you can't sit on your front porch with them, at least go to the public library. They're always looking for people who want to help out with the kids. The library and also the park district, just volunteer. They'll check you out very carefully, of course, because you'll be working with kids. Just want to point that out. Okay, I have to say that. But yeah, go ahead and just be creative with kids. I forgot to say my second point, because I'm very long-winded sometimes. Oh, my second point, yes, my second point. If you're creative and you want to come on TV Skywriter, just drop me a line, Durham Skywriter @gmail.com. Love to have you on. Doesn't matter where you are. All 3 of us are here in Durham, North Carolina right now. But I've talked to people in Oregon and what was that other city? Chicago, my hometown. And I had a guest from California. So come on, drop me a mic and come on. I'd love to speak with you. And with that, I say ciao for now. You have a great week, and I'll see you next Sunday. Bye-bye.
Thanks again.